Hi, and welcome to CEOIQ. I guess this is actually CEOIQ Radio because Sara King and I are working on a podcasting format to do lab session number 9 for the next great employee. Sara, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Ben. Thanks. I'm excited about the CEO Radio.
Terrific. We're working to deliver you digital content in all kinds of different modalities. This is also going to be a great session for you to download to your phone, to your iPad, to whatever digital device you carry with you, because what we're going to do in lab session 9 is review the entire Next Great Employee program, walk you back through each one of the labs that we've talked about and worked on, and you've seen all the videos on, talk a little bit about the various tools, the experiments, as we're calling them now, and give you a chance to just re-review and rethink through the whole program about where you might need to focus, what you might want to emphasize, actually what you might want to use with your team somewhere, to use at a lunch and learn or something like that with your team. So here we go. We're going to start with the introduction and orientation lab session. Sara, talk to us about the Next Great Employee program.
Well, I think, Ben, you and I come at it, you from more of the CEO leadership perspective, myself from more of an HR leadership perspective. So I think the joining of those two disciplines is what makes our course really unique. What we talk about and what the goal of is really helping you understand how some companies and their leaders just continually add great employees to their organizations anytime that need arises. How is it so easy for some organizations and such a challenge for others? Hopefully, through this course, you have picked up tips, you have learned things that will help you find the process much easier and have it something that you can duplicate for success in the future.
No, it's absolutely right. You look around and you see colleagues or other people you know that seem to do this relatively effortlessly. I think the hallmark of creating great employees for your organization is making it look easy. It's not easy. It's hard work, and it takes focus and concentration and, most importantly, discipline, because in most small to medium-sized companies, and frankly, even in larger companies, the people doing the hiring don't get to do it often enough to skill build with it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So hopefully by giving you a template, by giving you multiple worksheets, by giving you things that you can use over and over again, and what you'll find is the more that you use them, the more you'll be able to tweak them for your organization, make them work for your company. And then you can just, improve, tweak, keep going, making it better each time you interview.
That's a great point. One of the things we want to emphasize, and we talk about it throughout the videos that are in How to Create Your Next Great Employee, is that the tools and templates that Sara and I have created for this program are intended for you to customize. If you don't like some of the questions we ask, if you don't like some of the things we've included, change them for heaven's sakes. Make these things yours. We're providing all of those downloadable tools and templates that you'll often hear us refer to as experiments, because after all, this whole process of running a business is an experiment. All of those are provided in both Microsoft Word format and as PDF files. So you can grab the Microsoft Word formats and edit them for your company. And please work to make these yours. When you have really worked to make the tools and templates we provided your own and really applicable to your company, you are getting the highest and best use out of how to create your next great employee. So, Sara, in these first 5 videos of the Introduction and Orientation Lab session, we kind of set the stage for the whole program. We give you a chance to meet the two of us, understand our backgrounds, and we do bring a really great blend of that human resources professional and line operating executive experience to this entire process, which is really where we started it and what we really saw in our collaboration on building this program.
That's absolutely right. And again, when you look back at, why listen to us and the playing field today, hiring and bringing people into your organization is one of the most critical functions you perform within your company. Building that company, building the expertise, making sure you have people that are loyal and committed to your organization. And I think when we chatted about it in the playing field today, It's extremely expensive to have a bad hire. It is extremely expensive to bring that wrong person into your organization. So again, what we've tried to do is give you tips, pointers, and a roadmap so that you will not fall into some of those bad patterns that other organizations have that will end up costing you a tremendous amount of money and time.
And that is so true, whatever your recruiting environment is. And we talk about that in the playing field today. You'll recall, if you've spent time in that lab session, that you may have a totally internal environment and not use external recruiters or search agencies or whatever it is, or you may be using external recruiters. You may be doing retained search or contingent search. We talk about what those terms mean and how to think about managing recruiters that you might engage. The challenge is, obviously, recruiters want to finish the assignment as quickly as they can. And so there's a certain pressure to hire somebody. And yet the cost of a bad hire is so huge, you've got to be the person controlling the process and putting the brakes on, not just accepting a pretty resume that a recruiter might present to you. And that's why we feel like really understanding the playing field around recruiting and why it's so important is the focus of our first lab session.
That's right.
That really brings us to lab session 2, because you don't get to do this without a whole lot of preparation, which is why that lab session is called preparation, and more preparation. Right, Sara?
That's exactly right. And this is where we really have to define what is our need. What do you need for the organization? Not what you want, not what you think you need, but you've got to really scale back, step back, and see what is the need that we're trying to fill. So we have templates and tools that'll help you list out your requirements. Taking it a little step further, we have a roles and responsibilities worksheet where you really say, what is it this person needs to accomplish? That'll feed right into a position description. That is a document that you can then use for posting externally, handing off to a recruiter, whatever the case might be. But that's really critical so that you understand what it is you're trying to hire. And then we also have worksheets that'll walk through compensation. How do you determine what you want to offer that candidate? What are the components of the compensation package you're creating? As well as, really finding a 30, 60, 90-day plan for success so you'll know, is that person successful or not? And you've already defined it up front.
This is also the place, Sara, where we introduced the idea of hiring manager. We spent some time in the videos talking about what it means when we talk about hiring manager. We've had some confusion about that sometimes, because when I talk to CEOs about who's the hiring manager, they think that I'm talking about, you mean I got to go out and hire another person just to hire more people? That is not the point. If you are the person that a new employee or this new job you're going to recruit for or replacement job is going to report to, you are the hiring manager. And by the way, that means you don't get to duck the preparation. You don't get to vault over the wall a blank roles and responsibilities worksheet to your HR professional and say, here, Sara, write me out the roles and responsibilities for this job. Because the person who knows what's needed, the person who knows what's required is the hiring manager. And sorry, but that's you. If you are the person the job's going to report to, you're the person who knows, and you want to use human resources. If you're fortunate enough to have a great human resources professional on your team, you want to use that person as a coach and a consultant to developing those roles and responsibilities worksheets, those position descriptions, and all of those tools that we talk about. They're a consultant to you. They're a resource to help you clarify, but you got to get it out of your head, Mr. or Ms. or Mrs. Hiring Manager, in this process.
One more thing within that section too is we did lay out a recruitment planner for you that will actually be a checklist that can walk you through this whole process, just as an overview, so that you'll have something that'll guide you through each of our lab sessions, each of our experiments, that'll just pull it all together for you, just a helpful tool for you.
Thanks, Sara. I had completely lost track of that recruitment planner. Having a little checklist that'll help walk you through it is a great thing to be using. You can put it right in your folder or your electronic file or wherever you want it. So it's a really important part of that preparation lab session that we've got. Now, once you've got that done, that will move you to, Sara.
Yes. So now what you want to do, so you've really defined what your need is, you know what you're going to pay, you know what process you're going to follow. We've got to create a candidate pool. So we've got to get those candidates in the door. Then you decide, are we going to, do we recruit internally? Are there internal candidates? Is it all an external search? Is it both? Do we recruit with an internal HR department? Do we use a contingent or a retained search? So this module lab session will walk you through all the different pieces that are required to create that candidate pool, creating advertising, what website. There are multiple phases that go into creating that workflow, getting those candidates in the door.
And then we've also got a checklist there for you too, right?
That's right. That's exactly right. That'll take you, again, we're just trying to make this simple, easy steps to follow.
So one thing that might be a question in your mind, and if you spent some time with that creating the candidate pool, is this internal posting thing. For a lot of entrepreneurial companies, that's a relatively foreign concept about the fact that you need to do internal postings of these jobs, particularly if you have more than, I'd say, 20 or so people in your company. You need to be letting the people that are already there know that you're hiring for a job. Oh, and by the way, you don't get to assume that they all just know, because they don't, even with just 20 people in your company. And you want people to have a sense of, I've got a chance to move to something different. I've got a chance to take on a bigger role. And so that internal posting of the job is often, particularly in smaller companies, it gets overlooked. Now, I think, Sara, and you can probably give me a starting point for it. Once you get to a certain size, you almost have to be following internal posting and like that, right?
That's right. And it's always a good thing, because not only might an internal candidate be interested, but they know people. So again, it's just casting that net out further to get candidates into your organization.
So working on your candidate pool, now you've got to start getting set up for candidates coming in. And that's our lab session 4 that we call creating structure in advance. Now that you've begun to get some candidates in, you're starting to get resumes, whether it's from a recruiter or whether it's from a posting on monster.com or whatever you are doing. Now you've got to start getting things teed up and getting ready for the interview process. This is where we find that there is the least amount of preparation and skill building going on among hiring managers and leadership teams. One of the things we talk about in the video series is that you will find, if you go out and Google interview skills, tons of resources about how to groom yourself as a candidate if you're applying for a job. If you're out there doing your resume and getting it all dressed up and applying for a job, there's all kind of videos to watch, role plays to watch, and things on how to present yourself the best way, how to answer the questions and all that. There is not so much out there about how to be a great interviewer. And it takes some preparation, some creating structure for interviews in advance before you start interviewing. I like to talk about that interviewing, learning to ask great questions, it's a perishable skill. And few of us get to use it enough to keep it from getting rusty, dull, or whatever metaphor you'd like to use. And that's what Lab Session 4 is all about. We've got 3 additional tools that are more tips and sample questions. There's one that's successful interview tips. It's how to help you get prepared before you arrive. Some of it's simple, like turn off that freaking ding on your email and get your text messages shut down so that you are totally 100% present. Okay? Sample interview questions is a way to at least start framing questions around that specific candidate. And finally, the most important questions you can learn how to ask effectively are sample behavioral questions. So creating structure in advance is something you want to make sure you're spending time on. And then there's a couple of more templates in that section, Sara.
Yes, this one we have the interview questions, the behavioral interview questions, the samples that you can then use and pull into an interview template. And this is actually a working document where you can use some of our examples. If you want, you can create your own, but you create that standard interview template that you will then use with each of your applicants, because you want to make sure you're consistent with those candidates when you bring them in. And then we also have a schedule template that'll just have you make sure you've laid out in advance who's going to be interviewing, what's the time frame, and you can actually hand that to the candidate when they come in for the interview, and that way they know what to expect throughout the process, as well as your managers or teammates that will be interviewing that candidate.
It is so important to make sure you are presenting an organized process to candidates coming in. There is nothing more off-putting or demoralizing to someone who's thinking about coming to work for you than a totally hectic, well, I don't know who you're going to go see next. What is this? What is that? Doing a little bit of that kind of scheduling up front. And remember, we highly recommend that you put together an interview team. I mean, you want at least 3 people and maybe as many as 5 or 6 people interviewing the candidate. I'm going through one right now, Sara, where one of the CEOs I coach is hiring a new CFO. He just called me. He's on his 4th dinner meeting where he's bringing a different key person from his team to each dinner meeting to talk with this CFO candidate. It's that important of a job. So being organized around that and thinking about it is really important before you ever get to the whole topic, our lab session 5, which is about interview interaction. This is, as you remember us saying in the video, where the rubber meets the road. This is where you get to use everything you've brought to the table: preparation, your candidate pool, and creating that structure and getting ready for an interview. All comes down to lab session number 5. And so what we've given you there is some archetype examples, some downloadable sheets that will describe some of the archetypes of, here's the person I've got showing up. How do I deal with it? How do I frame questions for that? How do I make sure I keep things flowing? And probably hiring managers, one of the most important things to remember is to be in control of the interview. Now, that doesn't mean that you're dominating it, but too often what I've seen as a line executive and as a guy who interviewed for any number of jobs in my corporate career is that interviewers let the interviewee control the process. And then you're wondering, how come I didn't really get my questions answered? How come I didn't get what I needed out of that interview? Because the candidate controlled it. You didn't control the flow and make sure that you got what you wanted out of that. So we really emphasize that in lab session 5, Sara.
Yeah, and some of the templates that we have in there, one is an interview evaluation template. And what's really nice about that is you should obviously review that prior to the candidate coming in, but that's where you've laid out, these are the most critical pieces of this interview, and that should be driving you. If you're going through your interview and you're like, I'm not going to be able to answer these particular template questions because I'm not getting that information, it's a good checkpoint for you to stop, go back, let's refocus some of our questions. And what also you want to pay attention to, and it's both in the creating an advance and the interview interaction, is every part of this process is part of the interview process. How they address the receptionist when they walk in the door, how they talk to you when it's not part of the interview, but just in general, how they interact with people. All of that is indicative of how they're going to be within your organization. So you want to pay attention to all those pieces as well.
You know, one of the things I used to tell candidates all the time is that it is as important that you evaluate us as critically and as objectively as we're going to evaluate you. And so part of that whole interview interaction is making sure you're embedding questions about what did the candidate do to prepare for the interview. I mean, have they even taken time to go out and look at your website and read a little bit about your company? Do they have any clue what it is you're doing? Because if they didn't take some time to prepare for it, then all they've done is groom themselves to give you pat answers to your questions, and you're hiring a politician, not a worker. And most of us are not all that excited about hiring politicians these days. So thinking that through and spending that time preparing for that interview interaction is critical to the process of selecting, which is what Lab Session 6 is all about, Sara.
That's right. That's making your decision. So you've brought in your candidates. You might have brought them in more than once, depending on the level within the organization. Then you've got to really pull the information, not just from yourself, but from all the people that went through the interview process with you. And we have a tool in this section to help you. And it's a template that allows you to compare the candidates one against the other, because you are using the same questions, you are being consistent through your interview, so it's really easy to then translate that information into a candidate assessment tool to make sure that you're finding the most qualified candidate for your role. And what we've also included in this section are some types of pre-employment screening. So it's going to educate you a little bit about what type of screening might I utilize during this process and what would I be looking for. So again, helping you make that decision.
And part of that pre-employment screening, you may be using some sort of, I don't mean to use too much of a $4 word here, psychometric testing, personality profiling, some sort of more objective evaluation tool. You might be familiar with Myers-Briggs. You might be using predictive index. DISC, D-I-S-C, is a very popular one. Here at CEOIQ, we use two, and sometimes three. We use the CPQ profile. We use another one that is a conflict styles profile. And we've got several that we'll use like that, depending on what's going on and how senior the job is. If you are using any of those tools, or you're using some of the ones through us, then this is where you're going to bring evaluating those candidates and stacking them up against each other and against your team to see how is this person likely to integrate with our team? How are they likely to fit? Using some of those personality profiling tools can be very, very helpful. And the one that I could not remember a moment ago is Core Values Index. So we have three of them that we use: CPQ, Core Values Index, and the Craybill Conflict Styles profile that can come into making that decision. If you're already using one, please, we highly encourage you to be using that tool and being consistent with it. The same tool that you're using internally, you're using for external candidates in this process.
And then what we also, with pre-employment screening, it can also be an aptitude test. When I worked in a technical organization, we gave consistent aptitude tests, logic tests to all of our technical applicants. And that was another indicator for us in terms of how they perform within the organization. And we also utilized background checks, credit reports, depending upon what role in the organization they were applying for, drug testing. There are many different forms of pre-employment screening that we talk to you or introduce you to the concept of in this lab.
Yeah, it's probably worth spending just a minute on that whole substance abuse problem in this summary, Sara. Small companies tend to not pay much attention to that. And the challenge is in the notion of stuff rolls downhill. All large companies are now doing some sort of substance abuse screening, okay? And so the smaller you're getting, the candidates you're getting are the people who couldn't pass the big company substance abuse screen. And so you've got to pay more attention to it than you might think. You know, I'm down in Florida as we're recording this podcast, and there was just a segment on the news down here, Manatee County, Florida, which is Bradenton, Sarasota. It's an upper income kind of county down here with some agricultural and like that. They're having a heroin epidemic that's totally out of control. The first responders are getting calls for the same person twice a day for heroin overdoses, for crying out loud. So if you think it's not a problem, let us give you a clue. It's a problem. And you don't want to buy a problem by the fact that you're short shrifting the idea of substance abuse screening and finding out that you have hired a problem. Because once you've hired the problem, it is much tougher to deal with it than to put a contingency in your hiring offer about you got to pass our substance abuse screen. And we've got resources in there for you in that lab session 6 about here's where you can go to get contracted for substance abuse screening and like that. And we want to make sure that you are paying attention to that, because particularly small to mid-sized companies can get burned in today's employment environment. So now that gets us to, Sara, lab session 7, which is making the offer and getting acceptance. Here we've got some guidelines, templates, and tools for you to use about structuring your offer letter, making sure you're getting all the components of it. We're going to go back and look at some of the worksheets and tools that we used earlier around the roles and responsibilities worksheet, so that you can write into the offer letter some of the parameters of the job. You're also going to deal with some of the compensation stuff that we've set up, because your offer letter needs to talk about compensation. You're also going to want to make sure that you are not in your offer letter unintentionally providing an employment contract. And this is where I'm going to loop all the way back to our introduction, in which we said that it is not our purpose to address all the legal issues involved state by state or country by country around employment. You need an attorney, you need an employment practices specialist who can help you draft a template for your employment letter that includes all that cool stuff in it, without making it a book, by the way, but just has the right kind of disclaimers about you got to pass our substance abuse screen, that this is not a contract. This is, if you're in an employment at will state, you want to make sure you're stating that, and some of that sort of stuff in your offer letter. Once you've got the offer letter out there, you get into that high liability time of making sure you get acceptance and you get the person committed to a start date. There is no more dangerous time than having made that offer. The person you've made the offer to now goes to his or her boss and say, boss, I've decided I'm going to take a job with XYZ company. That's the high liability time. And you need to be spending some time nurturing that connection and making sure you don't lose your candidate, because at that point in the game, you've spent all the money. You've spent all the time. You have really focused on it and made it happen. And now the big challenge is making sure they get there. Sara, thoughts about that?
No, that's exactly true. On many instances, we'd have people contact us because they had received a counteroffer. I would then coach them on the fact that if they do accept and decide to stay, they've already severed a tie with that company, and that sense of loyalty just isn't there anymore. So I've had to counsel people away from their counteroffer, and I've also had to help prepare the person before they get that counteroffer. I would coach them when we gave them the offer, and I recognize here's what might happen and how are you going to handle it. Sometimes I'd role play with them, but there are ways around, again, just preparing that candidate for what might come.
And it's important to be paying attention at that time, because once you've identified that candidate that you want to come and you've put your offer letter out there, getting it to that point where you've set a start date and they're ready to come to work is the high liability time of they're susceptible to a counteroffer. The next time that they're susceptible to something is in the first 90 days. As a guy who changed jobs a lot in my corporate career, I don't think I ever did it, Sara, without somewhere in the first 90 days thinking, oh my God, I made the worst mistake of my life.
And that leads us right into our next lab session, which is onboarding and orientation. And ultimately, this was something that at our organization, I think we did extremely well. We really made that orientation and onboarding a priority for our new employees. You could say all you want that you're a people-oriented company, but if that person comes on board, their workstation isn't set up, they don't know who to go to for questions, that's going to be a real red alarm, a siren going off for somebody going, uh-oh, I've made a mistake. So what you want to do, and in lab session 8, we really talk about the different parts of an orientation and onboarding. Number one, you orient them to your organization. What are you about? What is your mission statement? What do you as a company stand for? Who are your customers? We give them simple things like, who do you go to for what? I need supplies. Where do I go? I'm having a problem with my laptop. What happens there? That's all your general orientation. Second, we talk to you a little bit about department orientation and further examples of how to onboard, but we've added a separate lab session for that, a separate course where we're really going to do a deep dive. We'll give you a high-level overview in Lab Session 8, but we are offering supplemental course material that'll really take you through that process in detail.
You know, what we discovered in developing this program, we had this Lab Session 8, Onboarding Your Next Great Employee, and it is such an important topic. It's too big to cover in one lab session, that we really needed to give you more in-depth information about that and to create better guidelines and a better structure, a roadmap, if you will, for how to effectively onboard your next great employee. This is another one of those places that short shrifting it is a mistake that can cost you a lot of money. It goes back to Sara's comment in the playing field that a bad hire will cost you about 5 times the person's annual salary, as I recall,
yeah, I think
Sara.
That's correct.
So this onboarding is important enough that we've actually created a separate leadership laboratory in CEOIQ that you can go and check out back on the CEOIQ website, and we would urge you to do that. We're going to give you enough in Lab Session 8 to get the job done. But if you're really serious about your culture, the values of your organization, getting people to buy into values and mission and the sense of vision that you've got, then you want to make a deeper dive here and be sure hiring managers, the people that a new employee is going to be working with, your HR professional, everybody's on the same page about how we onboard that next great employee. So there you have it. 8 lab sessions wrapped up with this session 9. That's a summary of the whole program. This becomes a great tool that you can listen to on your favorite electronic device. My gosh, you can put them about anywhere these days. And we hope that you find this to be a great walk back through the entire how to create your next great employee. Sara, final thoughts, wrap-ups for our listeners?
Well, I think in general, many organizations try to differentiate themselves by saying we're people-oriented. People have lots of choices now where they want to work, but people want to work for a company that they think wants and cares about them and their future. This is the part where you really start and lay the groundwork for that. How to create, how to hire, how to bring on that new employee is setting the groundwork for them to understand your organization as a people organization and to have them want to stay there and grow with you.
All right, there you have it. So get out there and start making something happen. Remember, each one of the lab sessions and how to create your next employee is something you can use standalone to go back and emphasize. You can work through the entire program. This is intended for you to use it in a way that best suits you. We're delighted you're here and delighted you're participating in how to create your next great employee. Go make something happen.